Good afternoon, dear friends. My name is Uģis Lībietis, and this is fifth podcast session of Riga Security Forum. And this is the place where me and my colleagues from Latvian Institute of International Affairs, together with experts near and far, we're discussing different interesting subjects about foreign policy and security policy that are affecting our current situation in Europe, in our countries, and in a wider perspective. And our today's subject is, to my mind, very interesting and maybe even a bit provocative. And actually, I'm happy for that because all my professors in university used to taught me to be provocative, and I have used it as being as a journalist always. And today we're going to talk about two very important neighbors of Europe, both very big, important economically, politically, in defense matters. We're talking about Ukraine and Turkey, and I think that's the motive of this discussion. Which one of them is more favorable or more suitable for European Union, or which one is even better for European Union? I think it's very, very thought-provoking, I would say, subject. But I'm not gonna talk here alone, and I have an honor to welcome my distinguished guests. And this is Justyna Gotkowska, Deputy Director at the Center for Eastern Studies in Warsaw. Hello.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
And Dr. Toni Alaranta, who is a Senior Research Fellow at Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Hello.
Hello, and thanks for the invitation.
So my first warm-up question will be like straight to the point, and I will approach you as a simple people from Poland and Finland. If you will have to answer the question, just if I meet you on the streets and I will ask you, which country is more important to Europe, Ukraine or Turkey, what would be your answer? Ladies first, please.
Well, I think that the average person on a Polish street would answer that Ukraine is a hugely important country for Polish, but also European security, economic well-being, and that we need to bring Ukraine into NATO. With regard to Turkey, I think the country is far away. I think in general, Polish people have a positive attitude to Turkey, but of course, the issue of Turkish membership in the EU poses a lot of question, and I think that would be undecided. If you would ask a poll on the street, I think you would have 50-50% of votes for and against.
Toni?
Yeah, in terms of my opinion, I would say that in the short term or in the semi-long term, Ukraine is more important for the EU. In the longer term, it might well turn out to be that Turkey is more important. In terms of the average people on the street, I would say that if you ask this today, I would say that 100% would say that Ukraine is more important. So this is the situation at the present moment.
You both mentioned that the answers might different from the time, but and you also, Justyna, you mentioned one aspect that we're talking about Turkey already being a part of the NATO, and now we're speaking about European perspective. Can we, taking into account all the geopolitical developments, can we even separate those two things now? Turkey as a NATO member or Turkey as a potential European member somewhere in the future? These transatlantic issues, should they be taken separately, or the security issue is already in one direction all the time?
Well, I think the issue with Turkey is much more complicated, and as my colleague from Finland mentioned, that the membership of Ukraine is important for the EU, for NATO in general, from a short-term perspective, and the Turkish membership could be important for the EU and the European project from the long-term perspective. I fully agree. And right now we have a situation where both in the EU and in Turkey, there is no real willingness for Turkey to join the EU, and from the Ankara side to join the European Union. I think that Turkey positions itself as a separate actor, also within NATO, even if it is a member. Turkey did not join the sanctions. Turkey tries to be a kind of a balancer, trying to talk both to Ukraine and to Russia, even if it is a part of the West. And under the current leadership, I think Turkey is willing to maintain this position of being a separate actor, being able to have more possibilities to shape policies on its own, to be more independent within NATO and from the EU. And even if we have heard from President Erdogan recently at the Vilnius summit, claims to restart the integration talks with the EU, for many observers of the Turkish politics, this has been a way or kind of a bargaining chip and the discussions with the Union about liberation of the visa regime, about restarting talks, about reshaping the customs union between Turkey and the EU. And there is no real willingness on the Turkish part to really re-enter and reopen these negotiations. And quite frankly, on part of the EU, I think that there are many skeptical voices about reopening the integration process with Turkey, having in mind that the internal developments within Turkey. But from a general point of view, a more geopolitical strategic, I would not discard entirely the possibility that Turkey might join the EU one day. This can be important if the internal situation, both in the EU and in Turkey and in the EU changes. I think that in a couple of years' time, we might need to come back to the idea of integrating Turkey into the EU from geopolitical strategic reasons to strengthen Europe as a geopolitical player, and thus we need to have this card on the table.
Yeah, Toni, just a bit of probably follow-up question. In this case, you already mentioned, Justyna, that this integration probably needs to be started in a couple of years. Probably it's already now that we have to think about this closer cooperation. How do you think?
Yeah, of course, we now are in the new situation again because suddenly the enlargement is back on the EU agenda, which was not the case for over a decade now. And I'm pretty sure that if in the next council meeting, there will be decisions regarding Ukraine, Georgia, Western Balkans. I don't think we should expect Turkey just looking passively from the sideways, that kind of development. It has its own interest to play in the Western Balkans, for instance. It has its soft power networks there. It's crucial actor in the Black Sea area. But the problem is that Turkey, of course, would like to mix up these things together. Turkish leadership has already several times pointed out that EU is suffering about strategic blindness in not allowing Turkey's accession negotiations going on. But the problem here is that and this will remain a problem for quite some time, I guess. That the union is not a security alliance per se. It is a political union, and we have these normative criteria, which all EU leaders have emphasized that will also need to be considered now that we are talking about enlargement with this Western Balkans, Georgia, Ukraine cases. So from this perspective, from the normative perspective, we are in the complete dead end with the Turkish regime, because it is doing the exact opposite of these things. And the other question then is that I don't think that even if we would have a completely mature liberal democracy in Turkey at the moment, I still don't think that that Turkey would have a genuine possibility to join the union. It is just too big, and many conservative right-wing circles in Europe think that it's not part of Europe, and this is the a dilemma that we will need to face at any time in the future as well. So it's gonna be tricky with Turkey, no matter what happens inside the country. This is something that I think we should keep in mind in all of these discussions all the time.
You have, in one of your publications, you have stated that one of the main obstacles to the closer cooperation with Turkey has been this authoritarian developments, and that these relations largely has been transactional, focusing on managing certain key interdependencies such as trade and refugees. For example, at this moment when we are speaking, Finland is experiencing also the refugee flow from very unexpected direction, I would say. Just almost 8 years ago, the direction was from the south. Turkey was very important at that moment. A lot of European countries were stressing out that we can't accommodate such a big influx of migrants, of refugees. Turkey was a huge help at that moment. Just a couple of years later, we experienced even much bigger influx of migrants and refugees from Ukraine. And at that point, Ukraine became very important part. So how would you comment? Why is, in one case, refugees from one side important, the other ones not important, or welcome or not welcome? And the country becomes very, how to say, comfortable for European interests or not comfortable for European interests? Justyna, I would ask your opinion now.
Well, I think that in case of Ukraine, people generally in Europe, both the societies and the political elites, since February 24th, 2022, think that this war started by Russia, invasion, a full scale of Ukraine, have an immediate impact on European security. It's challenging European security architecture. It's challenging also not only security but also core European values. So the right for people and states to determine their politics, challenging sovereignty, challenging the rights of the people, especially in the post-Soviet space, on fully choosing their representatives and going towards fully acting on democratic standards and going closer to the European Union and NATO, and the geographic proximity of this war to Europe, the brutality of this war that resembles what has happened during the Second World War, atrocities, brutality of the operations that Russians have been undertaking, the war crimes that Russia have committed. I think that all these issues together have shaken both the political elites and the societies, which finally have understood that the Ukrainians are a part of wider European society, and Ukraine is very, very close to Europe. And we see the decisions on granting the candidate status for Ukraine to the EU. We see the discussions about Ukraine's membership, which show us a certain shift of mind. And with regard to Ukraine, of course, we will see the developments in the coming years, but I think that this shift of mind with regard to Ukraine, perceiving the country as a part of European community and not a part of Russian sphere of influence, is very important, and therefore determines also the attitude of people here in Europe towards Ukrainian refugees. And with regard to refugees from the Middle East, I think this is a very different story, and therefore there is, of course, this immediate interest, I think, is not there. This cultural proximity and the feeling of belonging to the European family is not there, and therefore we have these differences in acceptance and taking an attitude, a different attitude towards the refugees.
Toni, your point of view?
Yeah, I pretty much agree what Justyna just said, that there is this issue of proximity. But then, of course, it is a crucial difference in the sense that in case of Ukraine, we have an external invasion. Russia invading Ukraine, whereas in the Syrian conflict, for instance, we had a genuine civil war generated by its own circumstances and mechanisms, particular to that country. In the larger Middle East, there are different kind of mechanisms and historical processes that have lead to the instability and conflict in that region. So in that sense, it is a bit different story in terms of Ukraine. There is also, at least when you look at the map, you can say that from Finland to the Balkans, there is this strong conviction that the Ukrainians are fighting on behalf of us all, because we who have been Russia's neighbors and we who have confronted it militarily before, we cannot escape the idea that the Ukrainians are also fighting for us in this war. So this is the difference in case of these two cases.
Seems to me that there is a wider perception that one of those countries is more like us, the other one is not exactly like us, but probably, and then to keep it a bit further away. But in a situation when a lot of things are depend on economic aspects. The economic issues, relations between countries are made on economic ties, cooperation. Everybody is fighting for better position, probably in Europe, in the world. Both Ukraine and Turkey are very important neighbors, and however, I would say that this attitude is also not exactly the same, and even probably that European countries don't take these aspects into account, or is it just a political issue, economical thing? How do you think relations between Europe and Turkey, Ukraine in economic matters, do you think how these are very important or not so important in these present cases, situation? Toni, now I would give floor to you.
Yeah, well, I would shortly answer in terms of Turkey in particular. I think that the economic bond, the economic interest, both of Turkey and some of the leading larger member states, is at the core of the relationship between Turkey and the EU. Even from the Turkish perspective, when it, as Justyna mentioned, it's seeking for strategic autonomy, trying to be a more independent player, trying to especially become more independent from Europe and the West, with which it has had this 200 years bond, which has been more or less a relationship based on dependency, and which Turkey now tries to break because it feels that it has been some sort of humiliating relationship. But even today, the EU remains Turkey's most important trading partner and economic partner. So this is something that will continue for the foreseeable future, and with something that Turkey's leadership is definitely also taking into account. But when it comes to Spain, Germany, Italy, France, all these actors have very large economic interest in terms of Turkey. They have big companies like Siemens and others who have production chains in Turkey. They have done a lot of direct investments in the country. So this is very much one of the reasons why, because one of the arguments is that we are at this place because the EU has never been firm enough regarding Turkey's behavior. But one reason for this soft stance has always been this economic interest. So yeah, that's very much at the core of the relationship, and that's something what has remained even though the political and diplomatic relations have become very strained.
What about Ukraine's case, Justyna? How do you think?
Well, before I answer your question, I think I would come back to what you said about that one country is like us and the other not. I'm not sure I agree. And I think Toni might know that better, but I do remember times when Erdogan came to power in Turkey, and a very enthusiastic stance of the political elites, especially in Germany, for example, because I was at the time in Germany, and I've observed that a certain enthusiasm that we can have a Muslim a government with a strong religious identity, and at the same time European one. And there was a time when the issue of Turkey's European integration was discussed and was accepted, even if there were some disagreements, of course, the EU, but the acceptance was much, much larger than it is now. So I don't really think that, we perceive one country as more like us and the other is not, but I think that these are certain developments inside Turkey and Turkish policies since then, betting on more independence from the West at the same time when Turkey is one of its parts, and certain balancing between various actors like Russia, like China, like others, with which the West have some strained relations. So this ambiguous position that Turkey has has chosen in recent years have been the source of doubts and problems for the EU, I think, when thinking about Turkey's EU integration. With regard to Ukraine and the economic importance of Ukraine for the EU, I think that Ukraine is becoming sort of liability if right now, if we look at the amount of support that the EU and the US and the West in general needs to provide to Ukraine, this year, next year, and in the coming years, with regard to military support, financial support, humanitarian support. But I think Ukraine can be also a chance and a source of economic growth for the EU, for Europe and for the West, if the Western strategy with regard to the war will be changed, and if the West sets on fully on Ukraine winning this war, on Ukraine becoming a part of NATO, and having real security guarantees vis-à-vis Russia, because only a settled security or secure environment and a secure Ukraine that won the war with Russia, and then deterrence and defense vis-à-vis Russia that is set up by the West, can provide an environment for economic growth that can be used, that will help Ukraine to rebuild after the war, and will help the West to in developing economic growth. So I think this is the future of economic relations with Ukraine hugely depends on security. And how the war will end, and that depends largely on Western attitude and Western choices.
Regarding Western attitude and Western choices, just recently when last year we experienced this grain transportation problem from Ukraine, which Turkey also played a huge role in helping Ukraine to export its grain. The moment grain reached Europe, we saw a back kick from European side. It should be okay that the prices for the grain go down, our bread on the table becomes cheaper. However, our agriculture sector says no, it's getting our prices down, our revenues go down. So in this case, Ukraine is not good anymore. So it's not a valuable partner anymore. Okay, yes, we are very interested in helping transport grains through our ports because that gives some revenues also towards us. But we should be very careful about if those products come in. I know that such cautious attitude is also towards, for example, to the poultry sector, where chicken meat is coming in Europe because the biggest factories are still in Ukraine, in the whole Europe region. So how do you think this cautious attitudes, till what point we are very interested in cooperation, and when this interest stops, and how can it influence our relations? I don't know how acute this question is towards Turkey. Probably we are already so much used to them that we don't face them anymore.
If I may start, I think we are in a different situation comparing Turkey and Ukraine. Turkey has a customs union with the EU, which has limits much more Turkish exports to the EU. Currently, since last year, Ukraine has full access to the European single market, which is an unprecedented situation. This is something that our countries, meaning the Baltic countries, Poland, has strived for while trying to become a member of the EU. And even that, after becoming a member, we had different we have worked very hard with regard to adjusting our not only agricultural sector, but basically every sector in order to become a full part of the single market. And then we had some also interim periods with regard to fully access the EU market. And Ukraine, without these interim period of adopting its productions to the European standards, with adopting standards with regard to its laws in all of the sectors, have this access since a year, more than a year, and this has created problems. You have depicted them, especially problems for the countries bordering Ukraine, meaning Poland, other Visegrad countries, partly also Baltic states, because the burden of Ukraine accessing the single market have been shared unevenly among the EU member states, and the agricultural imports from Ukraine have been distributed, first of all, at the markets of the countries bordering Ukraine, Polish, Visegrad states, Central European ones, Baltic states, and I think therefore came this claim that we should widen the burden sharing with regard to opening the market to Ukraine and create possibilities of for transportation of Ukrainian products also to Western Europe. Because I think that societies in our countries that have given so much help to Ukraine in every possible aspect. I'm not sure, I don't remember quite what the percentage of GDP Latvia has provided, what percentage of the GDP Latvian support for Ukraine is, but with regard to Poland, it's much. I think that then taking or having an additional burden of the uneven from the perspective of the Polish, for example, farmers, competition with Ukrainian farmers is adding to that, and I think that we need to talk about that within the EU together with the start of the accession talks of Ukraine to the Union. And I think that in other sectors we'll need to handle these issues as well, so that we don't have a situation repeated as with Ukrainian grain and other agricultural products. We need to find ways to redistribute the costs of the Ukrainian membership and Ukrainian participation in the single market across the EU. And we need, of course, to work on Ukraine gradually raising its standards and reaching the EU standards of production and overall exports to the EU.
Toni, what's your take?
Yeah, I would add that I think we should be prepared for the scenario where when we move onwards, hopefully at some point from this war economy situation, so to speak, to some sort of normal accession process with Ukraine, then the problem will start, because I'm unfortunately I do believe that there will be a hard bargaining and fighting regarding the distribution of the expenses in terms of the accession process of these new coming countries, and especially Ukraine, which is with its huge agricultural sector. So obviously the whole agricultural policy of the EU must be refashioned and reformulated. It will not be able to absorb Ukraine if we have this kind of common agricultural policy that we have today. So those things are ahead of us, even in the positive scenarios. When it comes to Turkey, I think the general view is that the customs union has been quite beneficial for both partners, for Turkey and the EU. There is constant talk about the possibility for the modernization of the customs union, but This is now stuck in the political limbo where there is very little political will in the EU side to do anything of the sort that would look like that we are strengthening the regime in Turkey or giving it some sort of medal for its actions. So that's not in the pipeline either at the moment, although it might be in the longer term. When it comes to the trade policies and these issues in more general, I think it is generally acknowledged that in terms of the Middle East, for instance, EU is very keen to form these barriers and try to secure its own production and its own farmers. And in that sense, that the talk, the rhetorics, and the real actions have often been in contradiction.
Okay, we are almost running out of the time, and I will ask you to have a short comment of about two statements. One statement is that European Union is actually interested in authoritarian regime in Turkey because it keeps the question of Turkey's membership off the table. And the other thing is that in the same level, European Union is kind of interested in war continuing in Ukraine because it also takes the question of EU membership off the table for some time. How would you comment that? I will give you each one of you 1 minute. Justyna, you first.
I think that this is a delusion, and we are entering, there is a shift in the international relations, and we all see that. That has not started with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but it's sort of demonstrated that we are in a different state of international relations in which Europe needs to be strengthened, and Europe can be strengthened by enlargement as well, if done rightly. And therefore thinking genuinely about Ukraine membership and potentially in the long term about Turkish membership in the EU should not be discarded and should be in the pipeline of European politics for years to come.
And Toni, you have this opportunity to conclude it.
Unfortunately, I need to agree with your argument to some, at least partly, that to some extent there are circles in the EU that tend to think that the authoritarian Islamist regime in Turkey is actually a nice excuse for not letting Turkey in. But this does not mean that that all EU countries or all constituencies in the EU are of this opinion, but some are. And this is something that we need to acknowledge.
Okay, thank you. And with this, I have to finish our this podcast session. And at first, I would like to thank Justyna Gotkowska from the Center of Eastern Studies in Warsaw and Dr. Toni Alaranta from Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Thank you for being with us. And for me to conclude, it's actually very hard to conclude anything because we know that either Ukraine, either Turkey, they are both very important, our neighbors in this exact date and also in the foreseeable future. One thing is for sure that Europe needs to continue to provide this opportunity or carrot to give the possibility for countries to apply for EU membership and to use their rights and chances to probably become somewhere in the future part of European community. We have to admit at the same time that it's going to take a long time. The discussions will going to be as hard as every next sanction package we are now discussing in Ukraine's case. These discussions will continue for a foreseeable future for sure. And our main objective right now is to do everything we can to help our neighbors and the main thing to help Ukraine to win this war. with this, I'm thanking everybody for watching this Riga Security Forum podcast session, and see you around. Thank you.